Greeting and welcome to the Intensive Success Secret. I am your host, Nishant Sharma. Please give warm welcome to our guest, Pam. Pam is a filmmaker and award-winning podcaster. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Nishant. I have to tell you, I'm really excited about this because my second largest listenership are people in India. So it's really wonderful for me to be on a podcast that is being recorded in India and hopefully also has a large Indian audience.
Wow. Let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you do today?
I'm going to talk about the podcast because that's the most recent thing that I've started. And I was at home almost by myself with my significant other because it was in the middle of the pandemic and we weren't really allowed to go out anywhere. And I had been working on a documentary which fell apart because of that. And I just thought, I've always been curious about making a podcast, and it has a lot of overlap with documentary filmmaking. And I just signed up for a class and I developed this podcast and I really, really loved it. So that's how I got started doing this.
Okay. What are the top three reasons why do people fail?
That's a really good question. I would say the top three reasons people fail. Um, Number one, exhaustion. It's a lot of work, as you know, to put together a podcast and get it out there consistently. So I think for a lot of people, it's just much harder than they realized. Um, and then another thing I think a reason people fail is that they get discouraged really easily because they went into it with unrealistic expectations. They thought they'd release a podcast and overnight they'd have thousands of listeners, and they release a few podcasts. They don't really know how to market it, and they get discouraged because it's hard to get listeners. And then the third reason I would say that people fail is inconsistency. They'll put out a show maybe this week on a Monday, then 3 weeks later on a Tuesday. And, people might like their show, but they don't know when to expect it. So they can never really gain a listenership that way. That would be the top three reasons, I would say.
Okay. What are your top greatest failure story? What did you learn and how did you recover from it?
Oh, I have so many failure stories. Um, I always fail for the same reason too. So that'll be what I learned. I always fail when I don't listen to myself. So I've taken on jobs, I've taken on film work where I know that it's not a good fit for me. But because I don't want to be a quitter, I don't want to be, seen as weak or something, I keep doing it. And twice when I was miserable, I got, well, I'll say I got fired from 2 film projects. They said I'm not fired. They said, we're just laying you off. But in my in my opinion, I was fired. And I knew from the beginning that I was wrong for this job and that it was wrong for me. Both of those situations were making me really unhappy. And after the second time, what I finally realized was I have to listen to myself. If a job is not right for me, don't take it, quit, do something that is right for me. So that's what I learned, to listen to myself.
Okay. What are your top three success secrets that other can model from you?
I don't think they're really secrets, but things that I try to practice is, first of all, be respectful to everyone. The person who is working for you, especially in a creative field, who's working for you this week, you might be working for them next week. So always treat people with respect. The second thing is always be grateful for people who are offering you help getting forward in your career. Don't forget what they're doing, that they don't have to do it. And then the third thing that I think is really important is to build your community. Especially in a creative field, you need community. That's how you get hired. That's how you get people to listen to you, is because they know you. You're part of this community of creative people. So I would say that's true for a lot of fields, is build your community.
Okay. What's your company motto?
My company motto, and it's brand new for the upcoming season, is how do you change the world? One artist at a time.
Okay. Who is your ideal listener?
My ideal listener, first of all, has to be curious. They have to want to know about other people's lives, especially a creative person's life. And they have to want to be a part of something a little bit bigger, finding solutions for problems, creative solutions. And it's really ideal if they themselves have a creative practice that they found to be healing in some way. So that's my ideal listener. But curiosity and an open mind are really the two biggest requirements there.
How do you find your ideal listener?
That is a great question, and I wish I knew more how to do it. But what I found works so far is that I go to where they are, whether that means going to events where I think that they'll be, going to virtual spaces where I think that they'll be, and again, trying to build that community, even if it's a virtual community. That's a great way to do it. And then the third thing I do is that I invite guests on my show who I think would be ideal listeners as well. And then when they share with their friends, that often picks up more ideal listeners for me.
How do you deliver five-star ideal listener experience?
Yeah, how? That's really important to me because I realize that my guests are giving me their time. And then I realize that for a listener, their time is very valuable. So I'm always thinking to myself when I write something that I'm going to record, as I edit something, is this interesting? Is it entertaining? And most of all, is it helpful? And it has to sort of go through those checks because that's what I want the podcast to be. I want it to be interesting. I want it to be entertaining. And then I also want it to be helpful to people. So that's always what I'm thinking about. I'm putting myself in the listener's shoes and thinking, if they hear this story, are they going to have that moment where they say, oh, yeah, me too. I felt that way too. And if that happens, then I know that it will be a success and it will be a 5-star listen.
How do you handle rejections?
Rejections are always hard. As a creative person, though, you get rejected all the time. And eventually you learn just you can't dwell on it. I always feel it and I allow myself to feel some disappointment. And then I just get back to work because what's the alternative? Do you give up every time you get rejected? None of us would get very far. So I'm when you work in a creative field, you get rejected all the time.
What are you grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? I love this question. I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm very grateful for my children, for my significant other. I'm very grateful that my father is still alive. I'm really grateful for the community that I built. But one other thing that I'm really grateful for is all of the people who have taught me something in my life. And not just a teacher teaching you at school, but those moments where someone has shown me something or told me something that changes my outlook on the world. And sometimes my outlook was wrong, but the person took the time to tell me why it was wrong. And you learn something and you grow. And they don't have to do that. That's an act of generosity. So I'm really grateful for those people who I've met in my life.
Okay. How do you start your day?
How do I start my day? The exact same way every single day. I get up, I make a cup of tea, and then I make a really good breakfast because that's my favorite meal of the day. And then I take my dog out for a nice long walk because walking is for me the best way to think. And it's a great sort of clearing of your mind, thinking about what you need to do that day, and starting off with a nice, clear mind about how you're going to lead your day. That's what I do every day.
Okay. How young are you?
I am 57 years old. Yes.
Okay. You are not 57-year old. You are 18-year young with 29-year experience.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. Who is your mentor?
Who's my mentor? I have a couple of mentors. I probably have more than a couple, to be honest. There's an artist who's also a friend. Her name is Awan Mance. And like myself, sort of in midlife, she decided to start something new, creative. And she started illustrations and comics and zines. And she started off very small, but she just was consistent and persistent. And she has had amazing success. And when I think about myself starting a new journey as a podcaster at this point in my life, I like to think of her. And I like to think about that idea of consistency and being persistent as the key to success. So she's one mentor. Another mentor who I really look up to a lot is another artist named Mildred Howard. And I look up to her for her integrity and her passion about the subjects that she does her art about and, just how she is in the world, her honesty. Those are all really great things for me to see and for me to remind myself as I'm going through my life as a creative person.
Okay. What's your favorite book and what are the top three learning?
What's my favorite book? That's the hardest question because I read about 2 books a week. Always novels. I've tried to read nonfiction and it just doesn't stick. And I feel like most of what I've learned is through novels, through identifying with characters and learning, to see the world through their eyes. And I'll never be able to tell you my favorite one, but I'll tell you my first favorite book. That was a book called Wuthering Heights. And I don't know why it was my favorite. It just was so very, very, it takes place in England and it was so very different from where I grew up and so very kind of dark and mysterious and, the way that you think England is like cold and windy. And it just was for me, a very romantic idea of this place and these people. So that was my first favorite book, but I read so much that to pick one favorite book would be really hard. You'd have to give me a couple of hours to think about that.
Okay. So, great. What advice you will give younger yourself?
What advice would I give to my younger self? I would give my younger self the advice to be patient in every way, in my career, in my romantic life, in my friendships to be patient. When I was younger, I wanted everything right away. And, you know, that didn't work out so well for me many, many times. So I would tell myself to be patient.
Okay.
I would also tell myself that 50 is a very happy decade. So to look forward to it, because it really is.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay. How can we support you?
I would love to have more listeners in India. That would be great. So anyone who would like to listen to Art Heals All Wounds, I would love to invite them to do that. But also I would like the listeners that I have already to be in contact with me. You can go to my website, arthealsallwoundspodcast.com, and you can reach out to me in email. You can find me on social media, either on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And my handle there is at Art Heals Podcast. I would love to know what listeners are enjoying about the show and what would they like to hear. Some suggestions. I've had 2 Indian American artists on the show, but I've never had an artist from India. And I would like to, but I don't really know how to start to find that person. So those are all things that I don't know if you can help me with that, but I am really would really like to see happen.
Okay, no issue. So, what would you like to say about your guest experience on this show?
It's been really, really nice. And I am so glad you invited me. This is a great opportunity for me. So it's been great. And you're very, very warm and welcoming. And I appreciate that.
Okay. What's your final word?
My final word is that I encourage everyone to build your community. No matter what you do, find your people, the people who are going to support you, the people who want to see positive change happen in the world. Find them. And that in the end is going to be your greatest strength.
Thanks, Pam, for sharing your wisdom with us on the behalf of our community and team. We really appreciate you. Until the next time, all good wishes to you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you too, Nishant, and your community.